The people we rely on to save us in emergencies could be facing a mental health crisis themselves. Thanks for joining us at 6. I'm Chris Tanaka.
And I'm Tiffany Tucker. An update tonight to an exclusive Cleveland 19 investigation. Cleveland paramedics, EMTs, and dispatchers are fighting the city for PTSD support.
Investigator Sarah Goldenberg spoke with paramedics brave enough to speak out, and they're calling for change.
There was a little girl. She was 6 days past her first birthday. I still have a problem with this.
Every paramedic has at least one call that haunts them.
And she was playing on a couch, jumping up and down, doing what little girls do. And somebody had come up to the house and just started shooting inside the house.
A call came in for a massive shooting around the corner, so naturally we jumped into service and we went and we took it.
She hung herself. She was pregnant, obviously, so we did what we could for the chance that the baby could be viable. Going in and seeing that, it's definitely very tough to get your mind around.
We spoke to 3 Cleveland EMS paramedics who asked we conceal their identities in fear of retribution from the city for speaking out. Combined, they have 50 years of experience.
This job, whether you know it or not, depending on how long you are, changes the basic person that you were.
This paramedic, we'll call him Sam, has been diagnosed with PTSD. He still thinks about that baby he tried to save but couldn't.
I actually started having nightmares, and the one nightmare that would always flash was that little girl.
Taking care of themselves is not part of their training.
They don't teach you to tell the mother that her 1-year-old is dead from a gunshot wound to the head.
You aren't taught how you're supposed to cope, how you're supposed to decompress, how you're supposed to go home and live your life after you leave work.
It's just basically get back in service and do your thing.
What's your response when you hear, well, you got into this, you knew what you were getting into?
You have an idea of what you're getting into, but nobody knows how dark human nature actually is until you have a front row seat to the whole thing.
The Cleveland Association of Rescue Employees, or CARE, represents about 300 dispatchers, paramedics, and EMTs with Cleveland EMS. They want the city to recognize PTSD in their contract, outlining protocol for handling mental trauma they suffer on the job. Cleveland 19 found police and fire have protocol in place to respond to PTSD, but Cleveland EMS does not. In most big cities, EMS is combined with the fire department. In Cleveland, it's a separate division.
We maintenance our trucks, we maintenance the equipment, we maintenance the radios, we maintenance the stretchers that we push these patients around on. But there's no maintenance for us as people who go out and do this job and put our hands on these people.
We checked with several third-party EMS providers across the country to see whether they have a policy on PTSD. New Orleans EMS says they have no written policy, but it is the #1 project on their list. They're working to set up peer support groups and physicians. Wake County EMS, which covers Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, also has no written policy. They say they teach a session on PTSD, offer a peer support team available 24/7 by phone, and have a psychologist available. Here in Cleveland, EMS workers can get help through fire and police, but they say it's not enough.
They don't know how to deal with our stuff. We don't know how to deal with theirs. It's just a different ballgame.
Despite everything they've seen, these paramedics all love their jobs.
You're there for people at the worst moment of their lives, but who is there for you?
Nobody. Nobody is right now.
They just want to be sure they're at their best when you need them the most.
We need mental health help out here.
There has to be something.
We all think it's time.
The CARE Union recently started a peer-to-peer support group. Tonight at 11, we'll hear from a former Cleveland EMS commander who almost ended it all. Why he says help for first responders can't wait. Getting answers, Sarah Goldenberg, Cleveland 19 News.
Well, City of Cleveland says, quote, the Department of Public Safety has resources to assist police, fire, and EMS first responders in dealing with the unique nature of their jobs. But again, Cleveland EMS workers say they need more than what is offered. You can read the city's full statement on our website or on our app at Cleveland 19.
Figured out that there were some Americans that had a bad addiction, and they just started flooding the market, and they put the prices really low.
Northeast Ohio continues to fight the opioid epidemic, but methamphetamine is now being used more than heroin in some places.
And the industry has evolved from its kitchen sink roots.
Meth samples tested by BCI more than doubled last year. Investigator Sarah Goldenberg takes us inside the resurgence of this dangerous drug.
It's called ice, crystal chalk. Meth flooding into Northeast Ohio is purer than ever before, more potent and possibly more deadly.
There's a lot of money to be made in meth, a lot. And plus I think people are scared to sell heroin because of how many people are dying.
Jeff Whittington is a recovering addict from Cleveland.
I've been sober 7 months. On the 18th, I just celebrated 7 months, so yeah, it's going good.
Pain pills after a sports injury led to his heroin addiction.
Started out snorting it. I was getting it from like Slavic Village area.
After time in prison, Jeff moved down south to Arkansas, but he couldn't stay clean.
I got on the meth and everything was cool. It started off just smoking it, you know, maybe a little bit in the morning, and then it slowly progressed a little bit at lunch, and then on the way home from work. And before you know it, there's no sleep involved, and you literally go crazy.
But as 19 News uncovered, the meth Jeff was smoking a few years ago is totally different from what's on the streets today. No more so-called one-pot shake-and-bake meth labs using cold medicine as the main ingredient.
But we could take a store receipt, trace it back to the person who purchased the pseudoephedrine, that we're finding those same people in the house where this drug is being manufactured. So it was a whole chain of evidence.
Jason Waddell is the director of Medway DEA in Worcester. They see more meth in Wayne County than opioids. Pseudoephedrine is a key ingredient for making meth, but ever since the law changed in 2006, cold medicine with pseudoephedrine is behind the counter at the pharmacy. Meth is now flowing from super labs across the border from Mexico, and it's cheap.
The cartels figured out that there were some Americans that had a bad addiction, and they just started flooding the market, and they put the prices really low.
Meth in Worcester is coming from cities like Cleveland and Akron. Undercover agents with Medway DEA are constantly working the streets, making buys and carrying out stings.
We keep building these cases and trying to take it to them and shut down the supply.
Those drugs busted by law enforcement often end up here at the BCI crime lab in Richfield. We got a rare inside look.
That if you see an orange color, like the one that she's getting now, you most likely have a methamphetamine.
It's an alarming trend. 19 News found lab techs tested about 12,380 samples of meth in Ohio in 2018, more than double the amount of heroin they tested, 5,300 samples. So far this year, the BCI lab has tested nearly 4,200 samples of meth and 1,400 samples of heroin. Keep in mind, not all drugs seized by law enforcement in the state are tested at the BCI lab. Here's BCI Superintendent Joe Morbitzer.
So when we see the opioid crisis that's been happening and we have the crackdowns on heroin, what we see is something that's been put in its place.
The hardest part may be trying to stop the supply.
And really start breaking up these drug cartels. They're very sophisticated when it comes to supply and demand and delivery. They're very well organized organizations.
There's no equivalent to Narcan for meth overdoses.
And that's where people don't understand. If they try to ingest or shoot up the same amount, they may be getting something that's a lot stronger, and that generally causes an overdose and sometimes a lethal overdose.
For addicts, the cycle is hard to break.
For me, I tricked myself into thinking like it was beneficial in my life. So I just keep doing more.
Jeff hopes this time he'll stay away from drugs for good. He's recovering at the Lantern in Cleveland.
I mean, there's going to be a day where I have to leave here. I mean, I just have to remember what I learned and remember what it was like.
Meth use varies by county in Ohio. In Stark County, they're actually seeing cases 2 to 1 over heroin. Meanwhile, in Lorain County, fentanyl and heroin are still the #1 drugs, but they tell us meth cases tripled since 2016. Sarah Goldenberg, 19 News.
That person is out there. Turn yourself in. Do the right thing.
65 days. A father searches for answers 1 year after his daughter was brutally murdered, found dead hidden behind church steps in Slavic Village here in Cleveland. Investigator Sarah Goldenberg found her case has been marked a priority for the homicide task force. But will that be enough to solve it?
A mom of 3, just 31 years old, was found beaten to death here at Broadway Christian Church. 1 year later, her murderer is still out there and her family wants answers.
Jasmine Washington's life cut short one September day, just half a mile from her apartment.
It's not easy. It's not easy at all. Every day, it's a new journey of loss.
Jasmine was the oldest of 6 children. Her father, James Washington Sr., is a reverend at Straightway Bible Fellowship in Cleveland Heights.
God can heal anything and anybody. I play piano, and so she started taking up piano and singing.
Last September, they went out for pizza together. James never imagined it was the last time he would see her alive.
And the last thing she said to me is that she loved me. And we dropped her back off at her apartment. Her apartment was not that far from where she was murdered.
The call came from the medical examiner's office. James was on the way to Bible study with his wife.
I was driving on the freeway, and it was not the easiest thing to hear, you know, that my firstborn, I still didn't grasp it. We got off at West 130th, and I got out the car because I was screaming. I just started walking because I don't know, I was just in a different place.
James walked all the way to Tower City, a place where he used to meet Jasmine. A year later, sometimes it feels like no time has passed.
It's still fresh in my mind that my daughter is gone, and I can't have her back.
In a homicide, the first 48 hours are the most crucial. If police don't get a viable lead, their chances of solving a homicide are cut in half. The 19 News investigative unit uncovered Jasmine's case is one of 26 unsolved cases assigned as a priority to the Cleveland Homicide Review Task Force. The task force, created exactly 2 years ago this week to tackle Cleveland Police's low solve rates for homicides with the help of the FBI and Sheriff's Office. Detectives solved less than 50% of homicides in 2017. The FBI reports national solve rates that year were at nearly 62%. So far, we found the task force has solved 6 out of 26 priority cases. That's 23% in 2 years.
Is it any relief, give you any sense of hope knowing that this case is a priority for police, for the homicide task force?
It does not give me hope. Not at all. It does not give me hope. Not giving me any answers. If it's a priority, then why aren't they out looking under every rock?
James says he has not heard from Cleveland police on his daughter's case. He has something to say to the detectives working on it.
Do your job and do it to the best of your ability, and don't sleep until it's done. I want to hear that they have a suspect. I want to hear that they have somebody in custody. I want to hear the judge say what you did was wrong and heinous. Just like you need to be healed, amen?
The struggle continues at church, where Reverend James Washington tries to heal others while still trying to heal himself.
You took a part of me, you took a part of my life, and although I have to forgive you, I'm never going to forget it.
We reached out to the Homicide Task Force for an interview in July. Since then, we followed up 5 times, and so far, we have not been granted one. Reporting in Slavic Village, Sarah Goldenberg, 19 News.
Now, Cleveland police say Jasmine's case is still open and active, and they have no updates right now. Her family is holding a balloon release this Tuesday on the anniversary of her death. You can find out more on cleveland19.com.